The air aboard the USS Vigilance hummed with the clean, sterile scent of recycled oxygen and ionized dust, a testament to its status as the newest Aegis destroyer in the fleet. Its corridors were polished chrome and muted gray. Its screens glowed with crisp, blue tactical data, and its crew was uniformly young, sharp, and ambitious. They moved with the easy confidence of men and women who had never known a world without satellite uplinks and quantum-encrypted communications. Into this digital ecosystem stepped Chief Petty Officer Anya Sharma. She was an anomaly, a relic. Her working uniform was faded at the knees and elbows, worn soft with 1,000 watches and 100 deployments. Her face was a roadmap of faint scars and deep-set lines etched by sun and stress, but it was her name tag that drew the most attention. While every other tag on the ship was a pristine, laser-engraved polymer rectangle, hers was a simple piece of stamped metal, its edges softened with age, its surface oxidized to a dull, coppery rust. The name Sharma was barely legible. She reported to the ship's logistics hub, a sprawling compartment deep within the vessel's steel heart. Lieutenant Commander Thorne, the ship's supply officer, glanced up from his tablet, his expression a mixture of impatience and thinly veiled disdain. He was a product of the Academy's fast-track program, a man who believed efficiency was measured in megabits per second and inventory managed by algorithm. "Chief Sharma," he said, not bothering to stand. He gestured vaguely at a workstation. "You're the temporary augmentation for our pre-deployment audit. Everything is on the network. The RFID manifests are synced in real time. You shouldn't have any trouble keeping up." The implication was clear. "Don't be the analog anchor in my digital speedboat." Sharma gave a short, precise nod. "Understood, sir." Her voice was low and steady, a gravelly contralto that held no trace of defensiveness. She didn't look at the workstation. Instead, her eyes scanned the cavernous hold, taking in the neatly stacked pallets, the secured munitions, and the labyrinthine network of power conduits overhead. Behind Thorne, 2 junior petty officers exchanged a smirk. "Check out the museum piece," one whispered to the other, just loud enough to carry. "Did they pull her out of mothballs with the Iowa class?" Thorne's lips tightened in a semblance of a smile. He saw the rusty name tag, the dated uniform, the quiet woman who seemed to belong to a different navy, a different century. He saw a problem. His division was a showcase of modernization, and she was a glaring, low-tech exception. "Chief," Thorne said, his tone sharpening, "I run a paperless department. Your job is to verify the digital logs against the system's automated count. Click the box, confirm the sync. Simple." Sharma's gaze settled on a pallet of advanced electronic countermeasure pods. The manifest on a nearby screen declared 48 units present and accounted for. She walked over to it, her boots making soft, solid sounds on the deck plates. She didn't consult a tablet. Instead, she unlatched the pallet's nylon straps and began a physical count, her hands moving with an unhurried, methodical grace. Thorne's jaw clenched. "Chief, what are you doing?" "The scanner array confirmed that pallet this morning." "You're wasting time." "Scanners see the RFID tags, sir," Sharma said without looking up. "They don't see if a casing is cracked or a seal is compromised. We have pressure sensors for that. They'd flag an alert." "Sensors can be spoofed, sir," she replied, her voice still even. "Or they can fail. A hand and a pair of eyes can't." The 2 junior sailors snickered again. Thorne's face flushed. He felt his authority being subtly undermined, not by insubordination, but by an antiquated philosophy that grated against his every modern instinct. He was about to issue a direct order when the ship's captain, Eva Rostova, appeared at the hatchway. Captain Rostova was as sharp and polished as her ship. She commanded the Vigilance with a cool, data-driven precision. She saw Thorne's irritation and the old chief petty officer manually counting state-of-the-art equipment. "Commander," Rostova said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Is there an issue with the audit?" "No, Captain," Thorne said, straightening instantly. "Chief Sharma was just familiarizing herself with our inventory." The word familiarizing was laced with condescension. Rostova's gaze fell on Sharma. She saw the weathered face and the rusty name tag. She'd read the chief's file, a long, unremarkable career in logistics, bouncing from one aging frigate to the next, with a service record that was mostly redacted or classified under decades-old operational security protocols. Rostova was a forward thinker. She didn't have time for relics. "Chief," Rostova said, her tone professional but chilly. "Commander Thorne's systems are the most advanced in the fleet. Trust the technology. It's what this ship is all about." "Aye, Captain," Sharma said, finally looking up. Her eyes, a startlingly clear, pale gray, met Rostova's for a brief moment. There was no defiance in them, only a quiet, unnerving depth. She resecured the pallet strap. "Trust, but verify." Rostova's eyebrow twitched, but she let it go. She had more important things to worry about than a stubborn chief petty officer. "Carry on, Commander," she said, turning and striding away. Thorne felt emboldened. "You heard the captain, Chief. Get on the terminal and do your job. The way it's meant to be done in this century." Sharma gave another short nod and walked to the workstation. She didn't sit. She stood before the glowing screen, her hands clasped behind her back, her posture ramrod straight. The two junior sailors went back to their own tasks, occasionally glancing over at the old woman, their whispers and jokes continuing just out of earshot. They saw a relic, a piece of naval history that had forgotten to retire. They saw a rusty name tag and the slow, obsolete human it was attached to. They had no idea they were looking at the one person who could save them. Over the next few days, Sharma became a ghost in the machine. She completed her assigned digital audits with quiet efficiency, but her real work began when the officers weren't looking. She moved through the ship's lower decks, her footsteps silent. She wasn't just counting supplies. She was mapping the vessel in her mind, not through its digital schematics, but through its physical reality. She traced hydraulic lines, memorized the locations of manual overrides for ventilation systems, and laid a hand on the main power conduits, feeling the steady, 60-cycle hum of the ship's lifeblood. Thorne watched her on the internal security feeds, a frown etched on his face. He saw her in the aft steering control room, studying the massive hydraulic rams that moved the rudder. He saw her in the auxiliary diesel generator compartment, checking the fuel lines. She was behaving less like a logistics auditor and more like a pre-deployment inspector from the old school, a role that had been made redundant by automated diagnostic systems. He decided to confront her. He found her in a narrow Jeffries tube, a flashlight held in her teeth, as she examined a junction box for the ship's primary fiber optic network. "Chief, this is ridiculous," Thorne snapped, his voice echoing in the confined space. "You're supposed to be auditing ordnance manifests, not crawling through the guts of my ship like a bilge rat." Sharma calmly pulled the flashlight from her mouth. "Your ship, sir? I thought this was the Navy's ship." She pointed the light at the junction box. "This node is triple redundant, but all 3 fiber lines are routed through the same physical conduit. A single point of failure. A design flaw." Thorne scoffed. "That's impossible. This ship's design was simulated and stress-tested 1,000,000 times before the first plate was welded. The system has backups for its backups. You don't understand the architecture. I understand that if this conduit is severed, the bridge loses control of the aft missile launchers," Sharma stated simply. "The simulation can't account for a shaped charge or a lucky piece of shrapnel. This is a waste of my time and yours," Thorne said, his voice rising. "I'm putting a note in your report. Your methods are obsolete and disruptive. Stick to your terminal, Chief." "That's an order." He turned and left, fuming. To him, her actions were an insult to the very concept of the vigilance. She was a Luddite, a dinosaur clinging to a world of physical checks and manual labor in an age of pure data. He complained to Captain Rostova, who listened with a weary patience. "I understand your frustration, Commander," Rostova said, her eyes fixed on the tactical plot in the Combat Information Center, CIC. "But she's only here for another week. Let her finish her process. Then she'll be gone, and your department can return to its pristine, 21st century efficiency. Rostova dismissed the issue, but a small seed of unease had been planted. She had seen Sharma's eyes. There was a stillness there, a profound and unsettling calm that she couldn't quite reconcile with the file of a career logistics specialist. But the ship was entering the volatile waters of the Cerulean Strait, a contested shipping lane where a rival power was flexing its naval muscle. She had bigger concerns than a single eccentric chief petty officer. The crisis, when it came, was not a volley of missiles or the torpedoes of a hidden submarine. It was silence. The Vigilance was on picket duty, steaming 20 nautical miles ahead of the main carrier strike group. The sea was calm, the sky a brilliant, star-dusted black. In the CIC, the blue glow of tactical displays reflected on the focused faces of the crew. Everything was nominal. Then, at 2:13, it happened. There was no explosion, no shudder of impact. There was only a sound, a high-frequency, almost subliminal whine that lasted for less than a second. And then, every screen on the ship went black. Not to a power-off state, but to a glitching, pixelated mess of green and purple static. The calm, synthesized voice of the ship's AI reported, system-wide data corruption cascade detected. Aegis combat system offline. Navigation offline. Communications offline. The hum of the ship's advanced electrical systems died, replaced by the jarring clang of emergency klaxons and the dim, red glow of backup lighting. The bridge, a moment before a symphony of controlled information, was plunged into chaos. Report. Captain Rostova's voice was sharp, cutting through the initial wave of panic. No contacts, Captain. Our scopes are blind, shouted the tactical officer. Comms are dead. Can't raise the carrier group, can't even get a signal on the emergency frequencies, came the report from the communications station. Helm is unresponsive. We've lost propulsion control. Lieutenant Commander Thorne stumbled into the CIC, his face pale. Logistics is blind, Captain. All inventory and ordnance control systems are down. The crew, so reliant on their flawless technology, were paralyzed. They were trained to interpret data, to execute commands through a screen. But with the screens dark and the data gone, they were lost. They were adrift in hostile waters, deaf, dumb, and blind. Rostova fought to keep her voice steady. Engineering, report status on the reactor. Get me manual control of the engines. The reply came back over the sputtering internal comms. A young, panicked voice. Negative, Captain. The digital control interfaces are fried. We can't regulate the steam turbines without them. We're dead in the water. The modern warship, a billion-dollar marvel of technology, had been reduced to a helpless steel coffin. The whine they had heard was the signature of a sophisticated electronic warfare attack, a digital plague that had not just jammed their systems, but had actively corrupted them from the inside out, turning their own networks against them. Thorne frantically tried to reboot his terminal, only to be met with the same cascade of corrupted code. He looked at his captain, his earlier arrogance gone, replaced by raw fear. The entire command staff was frozen, their expertise rendered useless. Into this paralysis walked Chief Petty Officer Anya Sharma. She emerged from a companionway, moving with the same unhurried pace she had used in the cargo bay. In one hand, she carried a heavy canvas tool roll. In the other, a vintage, brass-cased sextant. She didn't look at the panicked officers or the dead screens. Her gaze was fixed on the ship itself, as if she were listening to it, feeling its wounded state through the deck plates beneath her feet. She walked past the command chair where Rostova stood, stone-faced. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't offer an explanation. She simply acted. "Petty officer," she said, her calm voice cutting through the noise. She was addressing the young sailor at the helm station, who was staring blankly at his useless console. "There is a manual clutch for the rudder linkage in the aft steering compartment, deck 4. A large, red wheel. I need you and 2 others to engage it. You will take steering orders from me via sound-powered telephone." The sailor stared at her, confused. Sound-powered? Sharma was already unspooling a line from a nearby bulkhead, a headset with a simple mouthpiece attached. She handed it to him. "It runs on your voice, son. No electricity needed. Now move." The sheer certainty in her voice broke his paralysis. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing 2 other sailors, and disappeared down the ladder well. Sharma then turned to Thorn. "Commander, the primary electrical distribution nodes are fried. We need to bypass them. The auxiliary diesel generators? Are they still fueled?" Thorn, stunned, could only stammer. Yes, the log said they were at 90%. "The log is gone, sir," Sharma said, her voice devoid of any "I told you so" inflection. It was pure, cold fact. "I checked them myself 2 days ago. They're full. Get a team to generator room 2. There's a manual switchboard behind panel C7. It will allow you to route auxiliary power directly to essential systems, bypassing the corrupted main grid. Start with internal comms and emergency lighting." Thorn, the master of digital efficiency, was being given orders by the woman he'd called a relic. He was about to argue, to question her authority, but he saw the look in Rostova's eyes. The captain, desperate, gave a sharp nod. "Do it, Commander." Thorn, humbled and confused, hurried off to follow her instructions. Sharma was now the comm center of the storm. While the bridge officers stood by their dead consoles, she moved with a purpose that was terrifying in its intensity. She strode to the bridge wing, the sextant in her hand. The night was clear. She raised the instrument to her eye, sighting Polaris, the North Star. She pulled a worn notebook and a pencil from her pocket and began making calculations, her lips moving silently. The ship was adrift, but it was no longer lost. In a world where GPS had been rendered a fantasy, she was finding their place in the universe with knowledge as old as sailing itself. Minutes later, a section of the red emergency lights flickered and steadied, replaced by a brighter, steadier white light. The sound-powered telephone at the helm station crackled. "Aft steering, manned and ready, Chief." "Very good," Sharma said into her own headset. She turned to Rostova. "Captain, I have our position and a potential heading. The current is pulling us south-southeast. I recommend we try to get the engines online, even at minimal power, to hold our position." Rostova looked from the calm, focused chief to her own highly trained, utterly useless bridge crew. The choice was not a choice at all. "How do we do that, Chief?" "Engineering says the controls are gone." "The digital controls are gone, Captain," Sharma corrected gently. "The engine itself is just a machine. Complex one, but a machine. It has manual valves. It will be dangerous and slow, but we can bring the steam pressure up by hand." She looked toward the engineering station. "Who's the senior enlisted down there?" "Master Chief Franklin," the communications officer supplied. Sharma nodded. "Patch me through to him on the sound-powered line." For the next hour, Sharma conducted an orchestra of recovery. From the bridge, she spoke with a steady, authoritative voice, guiding Master Chief Franklin and his team through the complex, dangerous sequence of manually opening steam valves and monitoring pressure gauges that hadn't been used since the ship's initial sea trials. She directed Thorn's team to reroute power, bringing up one essential system at a time: ventilation, rudimentary short-range radio, and the most basic of surface search radars, one that operated on a simple analog magnetron. She moved around the bridge, pulling dusty, forgotten schematics from binders tucked away in emergency lockers. They were paper a medium Thorn had declared obsolete. Now they were the ship's salvation. She traced circuits with a calloused finger, dictating instructions to sailors who were rushing to carry them out, their earlier mockery replaced by a wide-eyed, desperate obedience. Thorn returned to the bridge, his face smudged with grease. "Auxiliary power is stable," he reported, not to the captain, but directly to Sharma. "We have lights, comms, and whatever else you tell us to power up, Chief." The ship shuddered as the massive propellers began to turn, slowly, unevenly. They had propulsion. It was clumsy and loud, but they were no longer dead in the water. It was then that the newly restored short-range radar flared to life. "Contact!" the tactical officer yelled, his voice cracking with renewed tension. 3 surface contacts. Bearing 090, closing fast. They're not broadcasting any IFF signals. The enemy had not been content to simply disable them. They were moving in for the kill. Rostova's blood ran cold. The Aegis system, with its arrays of missiles and its computerized fire control, was still a dead weight. Their main guns were useless without the targeting computers. They were a wounded giant, able to move but unable to fight back. "They've launched," the officer shouted. "Missile inbound. 2 of them." Panic began to flare again. There was no way to intercept them. No phalanx CIWS to spit a wall of tungsten. No SM-3s to reach out and touch the incoming threats. They had seconds to live. Sharma didn't even look at the radar screen. "Hard to starboard," she commanded the helm through the sound-powered phone. "Give me everything you've got." To the comms officer, she snapped, "Get those ECM pods I was looking at. The ones on Pallet C. Bring 2 of them to the portside signal bridge now." A sailor, one of the ones who had mocked her, sprinted from the bridge. "Chief, what are you doing?" Rostova demanded. "Those pods require the main combat system to integrate. They have their own internal power source and a manual activation switch," Sharma said, her voice a whip crack. "For field testing. The designers assumed no one would ever be stupid enough to need it." The sailor returned, 2 heavy pods in his arms. Sharma grabbed one, her movements shockingly fast. She unlatched a panel, flipped a series of dip switches with a small screwdriver from her tool roll, and then looked out into the darkness. She was listening, her head cocked. "Now," she whispered. She slammed a large red button on the side of the pod. A blinding, multispectral flare erupted from the side of the Vigilance, accompanied by a blast of electronic noise. Out in the darkness, the 2 incoming missiles, their seekers suddenly blinded and confused by a ghost signal they couldn't process, veered off course. One detonated harmlessly against the waves 1,000 yards away. The other screamed past their stern, so close they could feel the heat of its rocket motor. Silence descended on the bridge, broken only by the heavy breathing of the crew. They had survived. They had been saved by a manual override on a piece of equipment that a woman with a rusty name tag had physically inspected because she didn't trust a sensor. Thorne stared at her, his mouth agape. The design flaw she'd pointed out, the manual checks he'd ridiculed, the old-world knowledge he'd dismissed as obsolete, it had all just formed a perfect chain of survival. But they weren't safe yet. The enemy ships were still closing. They had avoided the first blow, but they couldn't dodge forever. It was at that moment that the restored short-range radio crackled. The signal was faint, full of static. "SS Vigilance. This is Carrier Strike Group 5. Do you copy?" The comms officer fumbled with the controls. "Strike Group 5, this is Vigilance. We copy. We are under attack. Our systems are crippled." The reply was immediate, the voice stronger now. "We see you, Vigilance. We're on our way. And we're bringing the boss. The Admiral is transferring to your ship by helicopter. He wants a direct report on what the hell happened out there." Relief washed over the bridge, but it was short-lived. An Admiral, coming here, to this crippled, chaotic mess. Rostova felt a fresh wave of dread. Her career was over. The pride of the fleet had been brought to its knees on her watch. 15 minutes later, a Seahawk helicopter hovered over the Vigilance's fantail. The ship was still limping, its advanced systems dark, its crew running on adrenaline and the quiet commands of a single chief petty officer. Captain Rostova and a pale-faced Commander Thorne met the Admiral as he stepped onto the deck. He was Admiral Kaito Tanaka, commander of the Fifth Fleet. A man whose reputation was forged in fire and steel, known for his piercing gaze and his intolerance for failure. He was short, compact, and radiated an aura of absolute authority. He didn't salute Rostova. He just fixed her with a hard stare. "Captain, report." "Admiral," Rostova began, her voice strained. "At 2:13, we were hit by an advanced EW weapon. A total systems failure. We were dead in the water. Hostile surface contacts engaged us." Tanaka cut her off. "I have the preliminary report." What I want to know is why my billion-dollar destroyer isn't at the bottom of the ocean right now. Rostova hesitated, glancing back at Thorne, who looked at the deck plates. We had some help, sir. An unconventional response. Show me, Tanaka commanded. He strode past them, heading for the bridge, his aides scrambling to keep up. He entered the CIC and stopped, taking in the scene. The dim lighting, the jury-rigged power cables running across the deck, the mix of dead screens and the single, flickering analog radar display. And in the center of it all, a woman in a faded uniform, her back to him, speaking quietly into a sound-powered telephone, directing the helm. "Chief, adjust course to 350, she was saying. "Let's present them with our narrowest profile." Admiral Tanaka's eyes narrowed. He walked slowly, deliberately, across the bridge. The crew parted before him, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. He stopped directly behind the woman. He saw the worn fabric of her uniform, the graying hair tied in a tight, professional bun, and he saw the name tag, glinting dully in the emergency lights. He leaned forward slightly to read the faded, rust-colored letters. Sharma. The Admiral froze. His entire body went rigid. The hard, impatient mask on his face dissolved, replaced by something else entirely. Shock, disbelief, and then a profound, deep-seated reverence. The officers on the bridge watched, bewildered, as the formidable commander of the Fifth Fleet straightened his posture until his back was a steel rod. He raised his hand to his brow, not in a casual greeting, but in a formal, razor-sharp salute. The gesture was so sudden, so crisp, it was like the crack of a rifle in the silent room. "Keystone," Admiral Tanaka said, his voice low and thick with emotion. "I'll be damned." Anya Sharma slowly turned, the telephone headset still on. She looked at the Admiral, and for the first time, a flicker of something recognition, memory, crossed her calm features. She returned his salute with an equally precise, if weary, motion. "Admiral Tanaka," she acknowledged. "It's been a long time." The bridge was utterly, profoundly silent. Captain Rostova and Commander Thorne stared, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. An admiral, one of the most powerful men in the Navy, saluting a chief petty officer. Not just saluting her, but addressing her by a name, a call sign, that resonated with an almost mythical authority. Tanaka held his salute for a long moment before slowly lowering his hand. He turned to the stunned command staff, his eyes sweeping over Rostova and Thorne, finally landing on the entire bridge crew. "You people have no idea who this is, do you?" he said, his voice a low growl of disbelief. He pointed a finger at Sharma. "You see a logistics chief. You see an old uniform. You see a rusty name tag. I see the woman who held Operation Cinder fall together with nothing but a broken radio and celestial charts." He took a step closer to them, his voice dropping, forcing them to lean in. 20 years ago, my Special Forces team was trapped behind enemy lines. Our comms were down, our evac was compromised, and a battalion was closing in on us. We were dead. The mission was a complete failure." His gaze locked onto Sharma. "But we had a contingency. A single point of contact, so deep undercover in a support role that no one ever looked at her twice. Her call sign was Keystone. She was the linchpin. While the flag officers were drawing up rescue plans that would have gotten us all killed, Keystone was already at work. From a supply depot 200 miles away, she bypassed official channels, rerouted a stealth drone for surveillance using a backdoor code nobody knew existed, and guided us, foot by foot, through enemy patrols using burst transmissions sent over a modified shortwave radio she'd built from scrap parts. She navigated us through a minefield using a tourist map and the stars. He turned back to Rostova, his eyes burning with intensity. When our bird was finally shot down, she coordinated local assets, fishermen of all things, to pull my men out of the water. She did it all without a single direct order, without a single piece of modern tech. She did it with knowledge. The kind of knowledge this Navy has forgotten it needs. He looked back at Sharma. "We never met. I only ever knew her by her call sign. They told me Keystone retired, disappeared into the system. And here you are, still serving, still saving ships. The revelation washed over the bridge like a physical wave. Thorne felt a hot, profound shame creep up his neck. He remembered his every condescending word, his every dismissive gesture. He hadn't just been wrong. He had been spectacularly, monumentally ignorant. He had mocked the very personification of the competence he pretended to champion. Captain Rostova's professional composure finally cracked. She looked at Sharma, truly looked at her for the first time. She didn't see an obsolete NCO. She saw a living legend hiding in plain sight. The rusty name tag was not a sign of neglect. It was a badge of honor, a testament to a career spent in the shadows, doing the impossible work that kept the fleet afloat. It was rusted because it was old, and it was old because its owner had been in the crucible long before any of them had even put on a uniform. The respect on the bridge was no longer just obedience born of desperation. It was a deep, palpable awe. The sailors who had snickered now couldn't meet her eyes. They looked at her with the reverence usually reserved for battleships and heroes. Sharma seemed almost uncomfortable with the attention. She simply nodded to the Admiral. "You had good men, sir. They knew how to listen." With Tanaka's fleet now on station, the enemy ships had already turned tail and vanished into the night. The immediate threat was over. A specialized tech crew came aboard from the carrier and began the arduous process of purging the Vigilance's systems and restoring its functions. But no one told Sharma to stand down. No one dared. Captain Rostova walked over to her, her posture no longer that of a superior officer, but of a student. "Chief," she said, her voice quiet, "damage control and system recovery are yours. Command as you see fit. I'll be in my ready room, coordinating with the Admiral." It was the greatest concession of authority she could make. An admission that the true commander of the ship in this crisis was not the one with the captain's bars. Sharma simply nodded. "Aye, Captain." Thorne approached her next, his face a mask of contrition. "Chief, Sharma, He couldn't find the words. An apology felt insultingly inadequate. Sharma looked at him, her pale gray eyes giving nothing away. "The manual override for the fire suppression system in Cargo Bay 3 is sticking, Commander. I suggest you see to it personally, and check the seals. With your own hands." It was not a rebuke, but an instruction. A lesson. Thorne understood. He had been given a chance to start learning what he should have known all along. "Aye, Chief," he said, his voice thick. Right away, he turned and left, a man with a new and humbling purpose. The sun began to rise, casting a pale gold light across the calm sea. The USS Vigilance, though still wounded, was alive. Its lights were on, its engines were turning, and its crew was working with a quiet, focused intensity. The chaos was gone, replaced by the steady, methodical rhythm of recovery, a rhythm set by Anya Sharma. Hours later, long after the Admiral had departed and the ship's primary systems were slowly flickering back to life, the vessel was quiet. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. Most of the crew had been sent to their racks for a few hours of desperately needed rest. But Sharma was not resting. A young ensign, tasked with finding her for the captain's official debrief, searched the ship. He didn't find her on the bridge or in the CIC. He didn't find her in the logistics hub. He finally found her in a small, out-of-the-way machine shop on the third deck. The air smelled of oil and metal. Sharma was standing at a workbench, her back to the door. The overhead light shone down on her, illuminating her focused expression. She wasn't filling out reports or basking in her newfound glory. She was performing a ritual as old as her service. On the bench before her was her canvas tool roll, unspooled to reveal a collection of older, perfectly maintained hand tools. She was carefully wiping down each one with an oiled cloth, cleaning away the grime and sweat of the night's work. Her movements were slow, deliberate, full of a quiet reverence for the objects that had not failed her. Next to the tools lay her sextant, its brass gleaming. The ensign hesitated at the door, unwilling to break the profound peace of the moment. He watched as she finished with her tools and picked up her name tag, which she had unpinned from her uniform. He expected her to polish it, to perhaps scrub away the rust that had been the source of so much mockery. She did not. She held it in her palm, her thumb gently tracing the raised letters of her name. She looked at the rust not as a flaw to be removed, but as a part of its story, like the rings of a tree or the scars on a veteran's hands. It was proof of time, of pressure, of survival. She pinned it back on her worn uniform, right over her heart. The ensign cleared his throat softly. Sharma turned, her expression calm, her work done. "Chief," the young officer said. His voice filled with a respect that bordered on veneration. "The captain wants to see you," he paused, then added, We made a fresh pot of coffee on the bridge. I brought you a cup." He held out a steaming ceramic mug. It was a simple gesture, but on a warship, it was a profound symbol of acceptance and gratitude. It was an offering. Anya Sharma looked at the young man, then at the mug. She took it, her calloused fingers wrapping around its warmth. "Thank you, Ensign," she said, her voice low and steady. She took a slow sip, her pale gray eyes looking past him, out a nearby porthole at the endless horizon, where the new day was dawning bright and clear. The ship was safe. The watch continued.